Hello, hello, one and all, two and some. This is Heavy Hands. I'm Connor Rebush. Phil McKenzie is here as well. And we have a slightly mixed bag for you on this week's edition of your favorite, most insightful, best certainly at fight picking podcasts. Cory Sandhagen, Song Yadong. That happened. Canelo Alvarez, Triple G, 3. That also happened. We're going to talk about both. And then we're probably going to fill in some space with the Sandhagen Song undercard. In fact, I say that, but pretty banging undercard, all things considered. So it doesn't feel like filler at all. I think there's quite a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. But yeah, we're going to start off with last weekend's UFC main event before moving on to either boxing or UFC undercard. And that means Cory Sandhagen, Song Yadong, a fascinating bantamweight pairing for a 5-rounder. We were very excited. We picked Cory Sandhagen pretty confidently, ultimately, and we were right. Broken clocks, Phil. That's you and me.
Yeah, I think we were right in a few key ways, and that's cool.
In multiple respects, actually, yeah.
Yeah, that Song Yadong is a super talented fighter, but the direction that Sandhagen has taken would always be problematic for him. And I think both of those things ended up being true. But yeah, we can talk about it. We can talk about it in detail when we get to the section, I guess.
This is the section.
I guess.
We're talking about it in detail now. Welcome to Heavy Hands, Sandhagen Song. Continue.
So, I think, firstly, the question for this one was, how is... what kind of directionality is Sandhagen going to take? We've seen him have more of a back foot performance, and I think the second of late, and I think the second question was like, how is Song Yadong going to track him down?
Yeah.
Is there any risk of Sandhagen building out an unassailable lead early, or can Song Yadong just simply overwhelm him with superior technique and athleticism in the pocket? So, I think coming out at the start of this fight, I think once again, Song Yadong looked better.
Mm-hmm.
Working off his lead hand, wrestling successfully with Sandhagen, and yeah, just working his way into the pocket to exchange with Sandhagen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you were supporting Song Yadong, this was like a super encouraging look for him.
Yeah.
Again, we were saying he's not going to change dramatically in who he is. And again, this looked very much like who Song Yadong is. But I think this was an encouraging start. I think I gave him the first 2 rounds. I think they were both very numerically close. But I think he was just in a similar way to like the Cheeto fight. I thought he was just landing the slightly harder punches.
Yep, I certainly gave him the first.
Yeah. Second was very, very close.
Mm-hmm.
The second, the round where he the second I think was the round where he visibly stunned Sandhagen about as badly as we've ever seen.
Yeah.
Right at the start. So yeah, I gave him that one as well.
Mm-hmm. More than fair.
Yes. Then he started to get run out of ideas. And he started to revert to form.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Sandhagen just gave him more to think about in terms of the intercepting elbows, body kicks as Song Yadong turned to face him and follow him around the octagon. I think the level changes kind of started to slow.
Absolutely.
Song Yadong down and make him forget about his lead hand, which had been so successful in the early fight, and kind of revert back to being a big swinger. But yeah, so this started off as, I think, basically a very another impressive performance by Song Yadong, but ended up being another like showcase for what a tremendously adaptable fighter Cory Sandhagen is.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to point out that this is now, I guess depending on how you look at it, 3 or 2 fights in a row where we have seen Sandhagen make some critical, quite specific technical adjustments, sort of based on lessons taken away from the previous fight, which, is like obviously extremely exciting for me because this is what I want to be happening all the time. And I'm more than capable of understanding why fighters don't make adjustments that well. I mean, there's so many factors going into it, and many of them completely like intangible, just like psychological factors and various loyalties. And how do you know if you feel like you have to change coaches? Are you making the right change? Like, there's a million ways career improvement shouldn't be, and usually isn't so like straightforward. But for Cory Sandhagen, it's like against TJ Dillashaw, that was the first time that we really saw a super committed back foot fight from him. And it looked quite good. He had a ton of great ideas. It really seemed like he was able to mold his high output offensive game to that really naturally. But we saw problems with his footwork, his resets, his escapes, all these things where he would put himself in bad positions when he would get cornered. And so against Petr Yan, he had worked on those things. And one of the major things we pointed out, both immediately after that fight with Yan, where Sandhagen looked phenomenal but lost, and last week in regards to this matchup, was that maybe Sandhagen should have just met Yan in the pocket more. That he needed to, as good as he had clearly gotten with the back foot outfighting style, he needed to have a better grasp of those moments when there's no getting away, you have to stop backpedaling and crash in. And we specifically said, how about some crashing elbows and forearm shivers to just run the shorter, aggressive puncher straight onto a spear, basically, as they get more and more determined to charge in after you. What did he do against Song Yadong? How did he split his fucking face open? Crashing elbow counters. Very emphatic, short, easy counters that just all they had to do to work. Very little aiming required. Not even that much great timing required. Just long as Song Yadong is rushing in, give him something to run into. That is very difficult for him to not run into. An elbow is a great weapon for that kind of counter. Likewise, I think another great sign for Sandhagen in this fight, a similar philosophy was applied to a lot of his takedowns, which we also thought he might do. He leaned on them a lot more than I expected. I think to good results. I think you're right. The threat of the takedown really, just the more threats you can give a guy like Song Yadong, the more likely he is to revert to his worst tendencies or whatever his most natural tendencies are. And they really turned him into a one and done, over patient pocket puncher. I think that was a major factor, but takedowns, as I have often said in the past, are another great tool to have in your pocket, to use as an interrupting attack when the opponent is just chasing after you. You cannot just backpedal for an entire fight. You have to pick your moments to stand your ground or to proactively close the distance, take advantage of the fact that you're getting the other guy to chase you, to step in when you need to or when the opportunity is there. And I thought Sandhagen did a brilliant job doing that with both the elbows, a couple nice flying knee attempts too, but also the takedowns. They were, the more aggressive Song Yadong got, the more useful those takedowns were off the back foot as counters, basically. And that is the MMA fighters' version of what boxers do when they backpedal. Oop, he's catching up to me. Step into the clinch. In MMA, stepping into the clinch isn't always good enough. You're not going to get a rest there like you will with many boxers. But a takedown attempt, if you can convert it or at least force your opponent to defend, is a very good way of achieving the same effect and saving yourself the horrible, stressful, and ineffective experience of just having to backpedal the entire fight. So I thought, once again, Sandhagen making the key adjustments, and I guess it's particularly rewarding because they continue to be things that, like, we specifically have said, I'd like to see this.
He's a real real rarity, I think.
Yeah. He makes me feel
it's
smart.
So infrequent that you're just like, oh, why don't they do this? And then they do it.
Yeah. Like, it's not just that it's great to see. It makes me feel smart. So it's... Sandhagen's improvement has been both fun to watch and validating in a way that few fight results are, because I'm so frequently wrong. Either in, knowing if the fighter is capable of making the adjustments I want to see them make. That's often the problem. But also just sometimes not having the right adjustments in mind. Sandhagen, it's like, wow, my adjustments work, and he can do them. It's great. Best of all worlds.
Conversely, Dong was really... it was one of those performances where it was very much kind of surface-level adaptations that got peeled away over time.
Yes, yeah.
And, the major thing that we called out is his... as good as he is in neutral exchanges, his lack of control of where the fight is taking and how to change that.
Yeah.
So just a tremendous amount of following Sandhagen around the cage.
Yes.
And that, as you said, it opened him up to to being just drawn onto being drawn onto shots, which were either Sandhagen would be either open or closed stance. He would use the step in to disguise whether he was going for an elbow or a takedown, or often he would just step into a big body kick.
Mm-hmm.
And he just kept constantly turning Song onto shots, who had to hope that he would be there in that he would be able to get a favorable exchange once they ended up facing each other.
Yeah.
But in the process of turning, he was getting beaten up.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, so at the end, this was apparently 2 rounds to 2. They were all tied up. I was more than fine with the stoppage.
Oh, absolutely. The momentum was not going to shift the other way.
The momentum was all in one direction, and it was a really gruesome cut. Like, you could see the outside part of Song's left eyebrow just
sagging,
moving independently of the other side of his face.
Yeah.
And I was just like, no.
One of 3 really bloody cuts, one of 2 extremely gruesome looking cuts on this main card.
Yeah. This was a real card for...
It was a bloody card.
Internal grief and external horrific damage.
Yes.
It was a real, what am I watching kind of card.
Uh-huh.
All these people with, terribly sad stories, and then all these people just getting their faces busted open.
Yeah. Yep. But hey, that's MMA.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where... So, Cory Sandhagen, in his prime... I think I saw him before the card when he was talking. He was talking to someone. I think maybe it was Ariel Helwani, and they were saying, how does your confidence feel? And he was like, my confidence is still great. I know that I can beat these guys with just a few adjustments and so on. And he's one of those guys where I'm like, at this point, I'm just like, wow, maybe you can.
He's right.
That piece of yarn fight looked kind of bad for you, even though you fought it very well, but maybe you genuinely can change up enough things to win these fights again, which is good because you're going to have to.
Yeah, and that's why I actually gave you that small pushback last week when you were saying that what Piotr Jan realized was the sort of objective truth that Sandhagen just can't punch with him, that he can outpunch him. And yeah, my point then was that's a little more subjective than that, I think, because if Sandhagen just made some of the decisions which he made in this fight against a not Petr Yan, certainly, but a somewhat similarly dangerous pocket fighter, to just take some of those engagements with both hands and smash the guy for being so aggressive. Being aggressive is risky, and you need to be willing to. And I think looking at what he did to Song Yadong in this fight, it's like, again, those feel like specific adjustments to what went wrong against Petr Yan. And
you're right.
He's proven that he can do it. So it's like, rematch him with Petr Yan. He had 2 fantastic rounds, fought with superb consistency, and continued to compete very well even after the momentum shifted. Who's to say he couldn't beat Petr Yan? He's a very impressive fighter. And I found it kind of interesting too. The commentators were talking about Cory Sandhagen. He does have like Rory McDonald old mentality. Apparently he talks about martial arts as something sacred. He's like really, really into it as an art, like in the way that all creatives sort of feel that sacrosanct feeling about their chosen art form. But I think you can see that, like it's like he does view it as a learning process. And unlike a lot of other guys who talk about, the beauty of martial arts and, being like water, et cetera, he's like building systems. He's wiring craft into this, like what for him is clearly an artistic endeavor. And I think you can see the results. And I would love to see a rematch between him and Petr Yan. I think that would be.
I mean, the issue here is, that, as you said, he's a guy who clearly likes both the art and the science of what he's doing, which is tremendously rare. But he's unfortunately in one of the worst situations to be in, which is that there are broadly 3 people at the top of the division.
Yeah,
perhaps 4 if Henry Cejudo comes back.
He's lost to 3 of them.
Exactly, he's lost to all 3 of them.
Yeah,
might be conceivably who might be conceivably contesting the title at some point. So unfortunately, he called out Rab or Cheeto, and he has to take that fight.
Yeah,
he has to win it, and possibly one more after it, which is a damn shame for him, particularly as he, pretty much any metric beat TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah. But things will shake out soon. I mean, I think I don't think Cheeto is a bad fight for Sandhagen. I think he's more than capable of winning that matchup, which it seems like is the natural one to do next. They're probably going to do it. And then whatever happens in Dillashaw Sterling, I mean, it's either Yan or winner of Sandhagen Cheeto that's probably getting the next shot. So he's in the conversation, and he's been, this is his prime, and he's clearly improving. I mean, we can talk a little more about some of the specific things he did well here. First of all, another point on the ledger of he could certainly stand to at least try to engage a guy like Petr Yan in exchanges a little more proactively. He definitely showed some chin in this fight. The chin is still amazing. Yes. The first left hook that Song Yadong landed, do you remember that shot? In the first round, he jabbed, half-stepped back, slipped, loaded it.
Well, that's that kind of shovel hook. Yes, I do. Jesus.
So fast, super clean. That was a frightening punch.
Yes.
Cory Sandhagen just ate it. It was not a problem. And he got stung, I believe, in the second round, recovered perfectly well.
He got punched directly in the temple as well.
Yeah. It was like an equilibrium thing, where, the world was just going topsy-turvy for a minute. He still has the toughness, this being his physical prime, to put all of these wonderful ideas he has to use in those matchups. So he showed that off. He still showed off the improved footwork. He still does some weird things that I don't love. I mean, But I thought he had some really good ideas. It was very clear Song Yadong wanted the left hook. That was his idea of how to cut Sandhagen off, circling away from his right hand. And probably 90% of them missed, in part because Sandhagen was doing a good job of pivoting to his right. It still bothers me that he has to go into southpaw to do that. People, should be teaching fighters to pivot both directions in either stance if they're going to be two stance fighters. But he did a good job of pivoting to his right from southpaw, and also of keeping the southpaw jab out there purely as a defense. He basically let Song's left hooks just glance off of his outstretched right arm as he was kind of laying back over his rear leg and pivoting. So that was really nice. It was just like built-in defense. Song Yadong was trying to cut him off, trying to corral him, and just couldn't actually land anything to the head because Sandhagen had a just good defensive position. Yeah, I mean, all that was great. Good use of the jab. A decent amount of pressure, too, early. Like, I think he forced Song Yadong to make the decision to have to pursue him, because it seemed early on that Song was going to be willing to counter Sandhagen, and that just wasn't sustainable. Super well-rounded performance from Sandhagen.
Yeah, very, very smart.
All right, anything else to say about Song before we wrap up?
Not really. I mean, I think at some point he is... I think you can give him a pass for, struggling in a fight like this.
Sure.
And for pretty much every struggle that he's had so far, because he is so young. But at some point you have to, I think there has to be a kind of level that he goes up.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, essentially, I think the main one after this is that they simply have to, look at giving him some cage cutting footwork.
Yeah.
He cannot just follow people around. It's been, this was the real test. Is it possible for you to just win pocket exchanges when you get them, even if they're not on your terms?
Yeah.
And the answer was just a fairly definitive no.
Right.
You can do it early at the beginning, but you can also just get overloaded.
Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot of people.
That could have been.
Go on.
So much of that could have been avoided simply by him not losing foot position the whole time.
Yeah.
So he wasn't. So Sandhagen couldn't select what it was that Yadong was running into.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Just being in a position where a well-timed feint will at least get the exchange more on your terms would be very helpful. He's clearly still in the stage where he's getting better at all the stuff he can do. Like, we saw some of those nice counters we've seen before. He looked lightning fast when he was actually able to get them off. His wrestling defense looked great, better than it has. Looked very, very solid. But yeah, he was just overclocked, too much shit to calculate, too many problems to deal with, and too many large strategic questions that Sandhagen was able to pose with positioning and generalship, control of the cage.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that a lot of that was exacerbated, which is probably true to some extent by the fact that couldn't see out of his eye a lot of the time because there was tons of blood flowing into it. But
he wasn't cutting off the cage before that.
I don't think it's an excuse.
No, he wasn't cutting off the cage before that. I mean,
yeah, exactly. This is simply made what was already, I think, going to start trending downhill, given how the two of them fought. It simply made it more pronounced.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that to pass it off as the cut would be negligent, frankly.
Yeah, it would. It would be a disservice. It would be giving him an excuse not to improve on, not to do what Sandhagen has been doing and look at these losses and say, there's a lesson here. I need to knuckle down and improve technically, and my strategic thinking. I need to develop some abilities that I do not have. I think this is kind of the ideal result. Even down to the fact that Song got stopped before accruing any more damage because of the cut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Superficial damage, really. So, good, perfect stoppage. We saw the way the fight was trending. No reason to think it was going to flip. Sandhagen, who is going to need more hard work and hard-earned victories to get himself back into a title picture, which it already feels like he kind of deserves just because he's been doing so well. It puts him in as good a position as this fight could to be back in that conversation. And like I said, if a win over Cheeto, that could be a title shot if things shake out a certain way. And Song Yadong's got plenty of time to improve and now some very poignant lessons to learn from. So I'm quite pleased with the way this main event panned out, all things considered.
Agreed.
Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we still haven't decided yet whether we're going to do Canelo Triple G first or start moving immediately on to fights like Rodriguez and Jaquani and Fili Algio. But one of those two things will be coming up after this break, and then the other one will be coming up after that.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right then, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We've got several undercard fights. We've decided to stick with the UFC for the time being, and that means the co-main event of this Sandhagen versus Song card, which was my boy, old Hobocop himself, although it seems like he doesn't do the R's as H's thing that some Brazilian accents do, because they've increasingly been announcing him as Gregory Rodriguez, not Rodriguez. So I'm still going to keep saying Hobocop. He took on Chidi and Jaquani in the co-main event. It was a Hobocop fight, Phil. You know what to expect. He's going to do some...
recently I heard someone who basically said Anthony Hernandez is the action fighter at middleweight. And,
so who said that?
I think you could honestly give that award to Gregory Rodriguez, but you might not necessarily think that. But
he's one of the action fighters at middleweight, all right? Don't fucking... use my words against me. You know I love Hobocop. I've been on that train.
No, it's fine. You want to betray him at the slightest, slightest notion of someone flinging someone else on their own head and then arm triangling them. You want to betray Hobocop like that, then go for it.
All right, fine. Well, fuck you, Gregory. No, I mean, these are two great middleweight action fighters, and that's why I said... it was a Hobocop fight. You know what you're getting. Like, you're going to see him do some incredibly impressive things, particularly offensively. You're going to see some great punching combinations. You're going to see solid footwork. You're going to see some flashes of defense with devastating counters coming off them. You're going to see some insane jiu-jitsu and takedowns. You're also going to see him get absolutely fucked up at least one point.
Yeah. I was thinking this. I'm finding it harder to say how good Robocop is.
Well, yeah,
he's managed. This is the thing. He's having insane wars with everyone.
Yeah,
and on the one hand, this could be this is someone with just a tremendous amount of vulnerability. All it's going to take is the right person to turn their lights out. On the other hand, you could just be like, maybe he's just becoming the Charles Oliveira of this division, where he's going to have insane wars with everyone, and then he's going to win because he's just used to that happening.
Yeah, he clearly doesn't give a shit. Like, he's already become so comfortable in these slugfests. I think he kind of was from day one. And yes, did that lead to a pretty bad fighter in Jordan Williams somehow knocking him out? Sure, but it's also led to just a pattern of consistently impressive comebacks where he's never in as much trouble as you think he is unless you've actually KO'd him.
Yeah.
He rules. He really does. Like, he's, there's fighters who we say they live or they die by the sword, but most of them don't do both every fight. So I love it. Yeah. So what happened? He came out, Chidi Njokuani, himself a perfect middleweight, in that he really has like this sort of narrow slice of things he does well, has some really incredibly consistent weaknesses. Over the course of a long career, you can be like, oh, he's literally never been good at this thing. For example,
he's basically like Chris Camozzi if you
Yes.
turned the dynamism up and the insane durability down.
Yes, yeah. And you know, he can get stuck in guard and put on his back, and he can be too low output. He can have he can choose the wrong weapons for what's needed. Like, he certainly had no ability to keep Rodriguez off of him when Rodriguez just started to crank up the pressure. He just doesn't have the tools. He's a perfect middleweight. You know, you give him, you could give him 5 guys in a row, which they almost did in the UFC, where he will look electric. And then you could just as easily give him 5 matchups where he'll lose every one. So what happened is they came out, and almost instantly Rodriguez tried to, it seemed like he was just sort of exploring the idea of a shot takedown straight into a knee, which ripped his nose apart from his forehead. Like, one of the weirdest and most gruesome cuts I've ever seen, actually. It was literally like a unibrow cut, where it like a gash connecting his 2 eyebrows, so that like his nose was like degloving. It was horrible. Horrible. That happened within the first 30 seconds of the fight.
Yeah, you've seen the picture of like his.
Ugh.
You can see the vein, the exposed vein, like running down the middle of his, like running down the side of his brow.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Horrible cut. What is Rodriguez's reaction to that? I guess I have to murder this guy now. I guess I have to do it very emphatically. And he tried. He tried his damnedest. And it worked. It also was like sort of a more comprehensive comeback than some of the other ones we've seen, because I certainly expected Rodriguez's grappling to be a major advantage in this fight, because he's really good at it. He's a great wrestler and a great grappler. And Chidi Njokuani, these are some of his historical weaknesses. But this was the most I've seen him. I didn't know that he would actually just wholesale win the fight with it, because often he's been too interested in doing the most exciting submission attack possible and just giving up position. He's not a very strategic fighter with his grappling. And here he just held Chidi Njokuani down and beat his ass. Very effective. And Njokuani, for his part, actually showed some really stalwart takedown defense. Like, I thought things were going to go very badly for him on that first inside trip. And
but then he really battled through it. He had that kept a hold of that whizzer and just kind of scrambled back to his feet.
Coupled with a whizzer, one with just a good underhook, he just maintained his grips and got down so he could build up and just fight hard back to his feet. It was honestly the pace, the exhaustion that made Rodriguez's later takedowns more effective. But I still have to give huge credit to Rodriguez for recognizing the position he was in and deciding to settle in, control the position, and do work with strikes, and not just allow an insane scramble. Even though at that point it might have worked, because Njokuani was gassed. Improvements from Chidi Njokuani, but Rodriguez also improving it in some ways, I think.
And just on both sides, just a super violent clinch fight.
Yeah.
If Rodriguez hadn't already been ripped open by that knee, one of the elbows from the clinch from Njokuani that he landed by the cage was just absurd.
Yep.
But yeah, it also just devolved into this kind of technical Pride Takayama kind of thing, where they both just had like one collar tie, and Njokuani was kept trying to like either throw his left knee or his right elbow, and Rodriguez was just wailing away with
his right hand,
just wailing away with his fists.
Yeah, couple elbow attempts from Rodriguez as well, but yeah, a lot of just grab an underhook or a collar tie and just wang the dude in the body with right hands over and over and over, uppercuts up the middle. Yeah, he just rules, Rodriguez. He's just like guaranteed violent action, and yeah, it's only a shame that he had the most gruesome cut I've ever seen, because it's going to actually mean like a long layoff, and he does seem like a guy who wants to be pretty active doing this. It's going to be several months, I'm sure, before that has even turned completely to scar tissue. So
yeah, I mean, it's looking much better in pictures.
I'm sure he's had it stitched. I mean, that is guaranteed like 15 stitches kind of cut at least.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it didn't at least didn't tear the vein or anything like that, as you can see in the disgusting pictures. But yeah, it looks okay from pictures I've seen from him afterwards. So hopefully it will heal quickly. But yeah, he should be out for a little while.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, sensational. Can't miss with this guy. What else? Oh yes, Andre Fili, Bill Algeo. Andre Fili, another one of my guys. I have scouted for him numerous times in the past. I always root for him, whether I've done scouting for him or not for the particular fight. I did not for this one. And this is not to pretend, by the way, that I have any like actual relationship with Andre. It's one of his coaches that has commissioned me. But as such, I've long had a sort of vested interest in Fili's fights. I've enjoyed watching him improve and become a more mature fighter. And this one did lead to a somewhat interesting discussion of scoring, which to me is actually kind of a. I can actually sympathize with both sides of the case. That being the third round, because you and I recently talked about how you mostly just ignore work from the bottom unless it's overwhelming. And this did come down to an interesting version of that age-old MMA discussion. But let's first talk about the fight as it played out. Fili, Algeo, both tall guys. I was curious how that would affect the fight, because on the one hand, I thought Andre Fili is not used to, it's the same thing you always get with two tall guys. They're just used to, it's like when two southpaws fight. They're used to this being an overwhelming advantage, a hurdle for all opponents. And when that is taken away from them, it's kind of difficult to predict what happens. Usually in MMA, because no one has defense, it leads to very violent fights when two tall guys fight, because the only way to save themselves from a guy who can touch them at their range is to touch him back. This had a bit of that, but it also had some interesting sort of tactical wrinkles from both guys. Neither one was actually like dominant with his jab. They both had a lot of moments using their range tools. Both had their moments with kicks. Fili had the bigger ones, but they were both doing good works with all those long-range weapons. Yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think that it was very competitive all the way through.
Yep.
Whilst I think not actually being that hard to score, with the last round simply being one of those kind of philosophical things where you tend to fall on one side of a divide or the other. It's not like, adding up things and they add up to different, it's not like counting strikes or missing clean strikes or valuing bodywork. It's just stuff like that. Yep. But it did remind me, it did make me think, how many times have I really seen Andre Fili get effectively out-jabbed? It's probably quite a few, I think, at this point, particularly when he is fighting people who are at range parity with him.
Mm-hmm.
I think, with the exception of guys like Miles Jury and so on, I think it really has been a path to success for people like Bryce Mitchell or Max Holloway to just jab with Andre Fili. Because
even Artem Lobov had a lot of success getting his jab in.
Yeah, because I feel like he's always so focused on kind of angling and, you know, throwing it off a level change, and it's always got a kind of Vincent Henderson kind of lag on it.
Yeah.
He allows people to just intercept him.
Yeah. He's got a good jab. I mean, it lands with power. It's one of those very spearing jabs, but he absolutely does sort of like leave it hanging out there a lot. And gets sort of like awkwardly committed to it. And yeah, it's unclear if he's trying to build something or like keep it in the opponent's face or what, but a lot of these fights, I admire that he's become so consistent with it, but a lot of fights where Feely is landing a lot of jabs, he's also trading a lot of jabs. And there was a lot of that in this fight. He landed plenty, but many of those were 50-50. And then a little later in the fight, Algeo was actually starting to be more consistently effective with his jab and actually, you know, find little angles with it and not have to exchange 50-50 every time he threw his own.
Yeah. I think Algeo's path to victory was always going to be kind of overwhelming Feely, and to his credit, you know, Feely still, and by this point, certainly a veteran, was still able to meet Algeo's aggression with aggression of his own. Was still able to, like, be the one that landed the telling dynamic offense in that first round. Again, like, using the jab to hide the right hand and the right hand to hide the right high kick. The classic, classic high kick setup. Robert Whittaker would be proud, that kind of thing. As you mentioned, then just started kind of slightly getting out jabbed in the second round. And then in the third round, you know, again, I think, did we talk about this or did we just talk about Andre Feely a lot? He is a good wrestler.
He's a great wrestler.
You know, he out-wrestled Dennis Bermudez when he fought him. Still
very impressed by that. In certain ways, he's the most consistently effective wrestler at alpha male. Like, I pointed this out at least on the Vivi, previewing this fight, that Feely's probably the best mat wrestler on that team. Because everyone else has that really typical TAM approach to the ground where they don't control positions. And Feely has consistently been much better at actually, like, keeping people down and continuing to float over them as they try to scramble and getting to dominant grappling positions where he can control them. And that happened in this fight. And he's also just a great takedown artist. Really great timing. Exceptionally good shot for a tall guy. That was one of the most impressive things about watching him out-wrestle Dennis Bermudez. So here's a guy whose center of gravity is 1.5 feet lower than Andre's, and he's still getting in at his hips and driving him off his feet. He's a great wrestler, no doubt.
Yeah, so I think just a very, very crafty performance from him, I think. A real kind of veteran's round winning performance where he pulled the right moves out in both the first and the third round, what he needed to do. In terms of that third round, you know, you mentioned the scoring controversy. I'm not going to give it to Algeo.
Yeah. I mean, it is, you know, again, this one actually does have some of that philosophical conundrum because Andre really didn't get anything done. And if you really, really prioritize damage, then there are an awful lot of ineffective, but still somewhat clean strikes from Algeo. Against, you know, and it's a question of how do you weigh that against the fact that, like, for a full minute, Andre Feely seemed like within inches of choking Algeo unconscious.
Yeah. I mean,
he was locked in. Like, Algeo was fighting for his life to not get choked out. And, like, ideally, that's the value of getting to such a dominant position and then continuing to control that position while the guy, literally with zero leverage, just taps you in the face over and over again. Like, he's not going to finish you. He's not going to hurt you doing that. Impossible. So how valuable is that? I agree with you. Like, I still would tend to the side of giving that round to Andre Fili. It's difficult if the guy's like in your guard and you're framing him and letting him drop into hard elbows. You're like smashing him in the top of the head with elbows. These are like short strikes that don't need a lot of leverage to be effective. Throwing hooks over your shoulder
into let's remember, pretty much the top of someone's forehead.
Yeah, on their forehead and the crown of their head. Like, I'm not going to count that for much at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think the things about that is that Fili was, I think, pretty gassed.
Yeah.
And he was also getting kind of covered with blood, which was, in fact, all from Algeo.
Yeah.
So that there's, like, this image of, like, weary Fili getting punched in the head and, you know, blood's flying everywhere, and it does kind of look bad. But it's not his blood, and I don't think the punches really hurt. And, I mean, in general, you know, my thoughts on this kind of stuff is, you know, as I mean, being informed by listening to guys like, Josh Saman and so on, is like, which fighter do you think the fighters would rather be?
Right.
Like, over the course of a round. Would you rather be Bill Algeo with your back taken, or would you rather be Andre Fili, who has, like, who is being punished but has Bill Algeo's back? And 100% Bill Algeo was having a much worse time in that situation than Andre Fili was.
Yeah.
And he was very angry, and, like, he did not feel like he was winning.
Correct. Yeah.
He was like, I want to get out of this. This sucks.
Fili was the guy who had every reason to feel confident in his position, and Algeo would have needed 3 more rounds of exactly that happening to possibly raise a welt on Andre Fili's forehead. Like, it's just not effective striking. So
yeah, and if he wasn't bleeding himself, it would have looked way worse.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wouldn't have covered Andre Fili's face in blood, which was splashing around as he was hitting him.
And possibly would have gotten submitted. Who knows if some of that residual blood was making it harder for Fili to keep a grip. Sometimes it means it's easier to get under the chin, but other times it means it's harder to lock things up. Especially if, like, he was put in a position where maybe he could try for a one-armed choke to just continue strangling the life out of Algeo, and that's hard to do when the guy's shoulder is all slippery. So I don't know. I thought solid performance from both guys, to be honest. I didn't feel like either guy.
I mean, there really wasn't much in it. It was just a couple of veteran adjustments from Fili that got him that win, I felt.
Yep.
And yeah, he won that last round, but he was out of gas by the end of it. It took everything he had. So I don't know how many more performances like that he has over fighters at this level. Might be one of those kind of Ricardo Lamas, Bill Algeo type moments.
Mm-hmm.
He just about pulls it out, but it was good to see.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, great fight, and I didn't think the worst of either man coming out of it.
Correct. And it's always gratifying to see the wrestling just being such an ace up Andre Fili's sleeve. I love watching him out wrestle people.
He's just a well-rounded quality fighter.
For sure. Okay, well, let's just quickly mention a couple other things from the card. We have to mention Anthony Hernandez, who you excoriated me for claiming to be the primo action fighter at middleweight, but he's certainly in that conversation, Phil, and you can't tell me otherwise. He rocks.
Yeah, I mean, this was really impressive.
Who thought the guy who handed Marcus Perez like his only UFC win would be like
Maluco?
Would be like the guy who just got obliterated by Kevin Holland before anyone thought that was a thing Kevin Holland could do to people in the wrong division, but also has a win over Jun Young Park. Out-grappled Adolfo Vieira. Had an insane fight with Josh Fremd. And maybe that's not a name that means as much as the others, but watch that fight again. Unbelievable pace and grit and just determination to stick to the winning game plan. And doing a very similar sort of approach against a really tough, powerful guy like Marc-Andre Barrio, and really just, I mean, frankly, dominating him. Barrio had some moments, but that's all he had. Hernandez was just all over him in every single phase. He's he's so like susceptible to things everywhere that it's a beautiful balance against how comprehensively aggressive and effective he can be. Because every single phase, he can make your life a nightmare, but also just might die. He's awesome.
He's a very un-middleweight fighter, in fact.
Yeah, honestly. He doesn't have that sort of narrowness that defines most middleweights. He's very well-rounded, both in his strengths and his weaknesses. Just like very little about him. If you watched him fighting, you'd just be like, the pace he fights at, the phase shifting, the tendency to take the fight everywhere. He just doesn't fight like a middleweight at all. No,
he fights like from someone from a lighter weight class, and yeah, this was just fantastic. This was just constant pressure, constant. Level changes, like just an insanely violent, brutal performance as well.
Yeah.
Against someone, just again like surprisingly effective wrestling.
Yeah.
I've thought of him as more of a pace fighter, but like this was, and also just like displaying that ability to break down the base when he thought he had it, then to just immediately let go and start punching the other guy in the face when he thought he didn't, and then to go back to try and breaking the base down when they react to the punches. Just like a really great-looking, all-round MMA ass-kicking.
Yeah, when he's on an offensive roll, there's beautiful connectivity to Anthony Hernandez's game. He is always willing to shift into the next idea. I actually thought like he does still wrestle like a pace wrestler, where it's just like drowning you with options and attacks and different angles. And I'm attacking this leg, and now I've switched back the other direction, and now it's a double leg, and you defended that, and now I'm hitting an inside trip. It's like one of those things where maybe the form on each individual thing isn't actually great, but Anthony Hernandez is a fighter who understands how initiative works, and will, handed the initiative, well, I mean, usually he seizes it, will just make your life a nightmare by just forcing you to deal with all these different threats. And increasingly, I think, seems aware of how to keep that initiative. Like, his pressure striking was much better in this fight than I've seen it in the past. Really nice, quick combinations, straight punches down the middle, and then not giving Barrio a chance, fewer and fewer chances as the fight went on, to breathe for a moment, to reset and take his turn, as it were. Increasingly, he would get those moments of strike and then be like, okay, takedown. You're up against the fence, we're clinching. Landing elbows, knees, then a takedown. You thwarted that, back to a 3-punch boxing combination to set up another takedown. Like, really, really fluid offense. And also, like, again, it's hard to, like, I have to look at this more closely and try to wrap my head around, how just grappling works in general. But, like, it's just hard to reconcile what happened to him against, like, Marcus Perez with what he's been able to do against, like, Vieira or Fremd or now Barrio on the ground, and how incredibly...
Just by looking at him physically, you have to be like, this is someone who is taking his MMA career a lot more seriously.
True.
Now.
Yeah. I get the sense that Fluffy used to be a lot less ironic nickname. He used to be a lot softer around the middle, and he clearly seems to have bulked up and also added just stamina.
I think he's mostly slimmed down. I mean, I also find myself thinking, is he a welterweight now?
Right. I'm not sure if it would even matter, though. Like, it seems like he's fast and absolutely tireless at middleweight. And it seems that so far, like, these people aren't capable of stopping him from out-wrestling them. So the size doesn't seem to be an issue. And even if they can force him to scramble, he will scramble forever.
I mean, there's one way to find out whether the size is an issue and that kind of stuff.
Who is it?
Gregory Rodriguez.
Hey. Make that fight. God damn it. Make that fight right now. Yeah, I mean, it would be a barn burner.
It would be absolute. Can you imagine if it wasn't? It'd be so weird.
Even that would be interesting. Somehow.
Can you imagine if, like, Gregory Rodriguez was suddenly just decides that he's going to have this, like, outside dabbing performance, and then Hernandez, I don't know, even like is like he's going to counterpunch and low kick.
I can't imagine how it could be bad.
Absolutely, I can't do it.
They don't know how. They don't know how to have that kind of fight. But yeah, I continue to be super impressed with Anthony Hernandez, and he does genuinely seem to just keep getting better, and he's just got such an exciting style.
He really does seem like he's got the potential to be a kind of Chito Vera, like sneaker contender, where you look at him in the early going and it's just like, oh, not, but not great. But then a few things start clicking and he starts taking his career more seriously, and you have like a genuinely dangerous fighter.
Yeah, he's become quite the killer. Again, seriously, I know like you don't give a shit when I say the names Anthony Hernandez, Josh Fremd, but if any of our listeners missed that fight or don't remember it, watch this one, watch this one again, and then watch that one. They're similarly incredible, and that one even more so because Fremd is a better wrestler and grappler than Barrio. So more pushback, and seeing Hernandez just continue to keep his foot on the gas despite that. He's unbelievable. He can just go for days. Okay, that's probably all we have time for. I mean, that's been half an hour talking about this undercard. You can mention the fact that Damon Jackson had a huge upset on Pat Sabatini. Not sure how much you can take away from that result. He kind of just clipped Sabatini with an uppercut.
It was a front kick, right?
Oh yes,
and then him down for the finish.
Yeah, and then crashed into the clinch and then uppercutted him, and Sabatini basically just his legs were gone. But it is interesting, man, that Damon Jackson, Zane was saying, like, this is just a guy you just want to fade every time. You look at him and you're like, yeah, I know he's tough, but I've seen toughness, as a sole ingredient not be enough so many times. His record is astounding, though. And to this day, no one, including Sabatini, I was curious to see this and a little sad we didn't get to have it tested, but to this day, one way or another, no one's like out-grappled Damon Jackson. So it's like he does seem to be kind of like the grappler killer in the featherweight division right now. He's the ultimate gatekeeper for your hot grappling prospects. And yeah, he certainly crushed Sabatini.
A bit of that Julian Erosa in that he tends to get wiped out instantly.
Yeah.
Or he just wins.
Yeah, exactly. But it's great to see him win. I like the guy. Love his style. Yeah. And Julian Robertson didn't look great, but she did beat Agapova, who also didn't look great, and that was satisfying. Although, admittedly, negligent reffing in that fight. Did you watch that one?
Yes. What are you referring to?
Agapova was unconscious, I think, much longer than necessary. There's some room for forgiveness for the ref. I think it was Mark Smith that she but essentially for 30 seconds, Agapova was flitting in and out of consciousness, while doing absolutely nothing that you're supposed to do to actually escape the choke.
Oh yeah, this was the thing where she was just
and then she had a seizure.
She was doing super weird stuff while she was getting rear naked choked, right?
Yeah, it got slapped on while she was on all fours, and then it was one of those things where she fell back like Robertson. Showing her killer instinct, she just gave up the hooks and just kind of walked around while continuing to strangle Agapova. Settled back into back mount when Agapova's little struggle was done. And Agapova was not fighting hands at all. She was not conscious. I think if she was at all conscious, she would have been just instinctively fighting hands. She was grabbing her own hands and stuff. Her hands didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, then, you're right. That was, mostly I was just thinking of it as her being just
bad.
Yeah,
right.
Frankly, yeah, no, being insane rear naked choke defense. But
I think she was unconscious.
Admittedly, because she didn't really start fighting hands at any point. Yeah. I think intelligent defense has to count for something at some point.
Exactly. That's the rare grappling instance. That would have should have been the grappling equivalent of a standing TKO. You don't need to see the fighter go down to call a knockout if they are not effectively defending themselves, and the only possible future is just worse damage. And in this case, if somebody is clearly being choked out for more than 10 seconds, and they're not fighting the hands, and it's clear they have absolutely no ability to escape, call it a TKO if you need to, but stop the fight. You don't have to let her go unconscious, because it was very troubling. And how dare you, Mark Smith, for making me feel troubled on Maria Agapova's behalf, because she's such a shithead. But when she finally stopped moving and went limp, and then the moment Robertson released, she literally had a seizure.
Yeah, she was in this kind of weird fugue state where she stiffened up and sort of
her body was
into the distance. Yeah.
Oh my God! Thank God, oxygen to the brain. It was not good. Usually getting choked out is safer than getting knocked out. This was not one of those cases. That was brain damage happening, and we watched it. So Mark Smith should definitely take a long look at that, and perhaps a little conference for referees is necessary to admonish these officials to be more proactive in stopping fights with submissions, whether or not there's a tap out or unconsciousness. We've already seen many examples. Unconsciousness takes many forms. And for example, Ricky Simone Merab Dvalishvili was another one where it's this guy's not falling asleep. He must not be getting choked out. And then you look at a minute and a half later and he's finally out of the submission and his body is doing all kinds of weird, strange shit that he's not in control of. And it's this was just his body's weird way of being choked unconscious. He's not conscious.
Yeah. Another reason why I'm barely too sympathetic of people who complain about early taps or early submissions like that.
Right.
I think it was one of Ben Askren's early fights in Bellator, but also Michael Chiesa, Kevin Lee.
Yeah, another one. Yeah.
If you look like you are getting finished,
that's it.
The referee should stop the fight.
Yeah, it's enough for striking. It should be enough for grappling too.
And you're basically if you get mad about that, then you shouldn't get yourself put in a position where you look like you're being finished.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, so that'll do it for this UFC undercard. More than enough time spent on that. When we come back, fortunately, I don't think there's an awful lot to say about this rubber match between Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin, but we are going to talk about it after this. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're talking about some fisticuffs, some boxing. Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin. They fought for a third time last weekend. This one kind of snuck up on me. Ironically, I sort of hit upon what seemed to me like a valid comparison between Song Yadong and Canelo Alvarez before actually realizing that this fight was happening the same weekend. Just sort of, I guess, the time for Canelo to try to cement this little trilogy after that surprising loss to Dmitry Bivol. And that's kind of what it felt like. Was just like a great fighter coming back and cementing his sort of status at the most opportune time, because it has to be said, Gennady Golovkin looked old.
Yeah, this was a little bit sad.
Yeah.
And I think maybe one of the reasons why we didn't particularly tech this one coming up, because everyone felt it would go a slightly dispiriting way in the run-up.
Yeah.
And it did.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, in some ways it feels like it's one of those fights that these guys get to make a reasonable amount of money out of it. I'm sure it's not doing anything like the numbers it would have done when they were both at their peaks.
No, I'm sure Golovkin got paid.
Organic interest, but Triple G unfortunately isn't going to get a better payday than this at this point in his career.
Yeah.
But I feel like for both guys, it's a little bit of a disservice. In some ways, obviously Triple G didn't look good, and there wasn't really much reason to expect him to look good.
Yeah.
Also, like, Canelo is himself, through no fault of his own, he doesn't get any chance to be like, oh yeah, I actually solved this guy. If you look at how our fights trended, they went from like a very contentious decision in the first fight to a less contentious decision in the second one to a very clear win. Because you obviously can't say that looking at how Triple G looked. There's no way you can make a real case, I think, that Canelo just has Triple G's number based on this fight, because Golovkin looked so visibly diminished.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just a bit unsatisfying, all things considered. And you're absolutely right that, like, I was aware this fight was on the horizon, just hadn't cemented in my mind when it was happening. But definitely there were way more people, even, like, there was a lot of sadness hedging from Golovkin fanboys as well. Like, even they were expecting, like, oh, this, like, we've seen the way this series has trended. We watched, Golovkin's recent fights. He had that fight with Murata where he started really, really sluggishly and got hit clean a lot. He's had, I think, multiple fights recently where he seemed to get hurt more than he certainly ever used to, or at least stunned and kind of shaken up and put into a more defensive posture. You could kind of see this coming. And, it's just... it's always a bit of a disappointment. Like, there's two ways where you can predict something and it plays out as you expected, in the way that Sandhagen Song did, where there is a part of me that's like a little disappointed that just no surprise happened. Like, I wanted something unexpected. That's why I watch. That's why I need my stories, is for the twists and the turns. But also, it was satisfying. It was like, this is a thing that should have happened. I may have only learned the things I expected to learn, but that's good. I still these characters have progressed forward, and this is the other side of that coin, where it's like everyone seemed to have a unanimous feeling about how this was going to go, and then there's like no surprises. It's like somehow even more one-sided than you expected, while also not having like the emphatic brutality of, like, a lot of people were thinking this is going to be the one where Canelo knocks Triple G out. And that didn't happen either. He just kind of outfought him for the better part of 12 rounds. So, yeah. What is there to take away from... go on.
I was going to say, so I think the dynamic in general of the fight was that of the first two fights, simply with the dials turned greatly down on one of the fighters.
Yeah.
I think in both of the first two fights... specifically the first one, it was the one where it was the surprise. I was always surprised that Canelo was the puncher in the fight, considering he's definitely had more of that mystique around him, I think, since the Golovkin fight. But I think given the narrative around the two of Golovkin as the killer, and kind of Canelo as the tactician, and the the slick boxer, let's say, with the defense highlights and so on, was a surprise. Like all of their fights have been defined essentially Golovkin trying to rack up numbers and land the jab, and Alvarez trying to counterpunch with like various degrees of aggressive counterpunching against Golovkin. And from this one, it was pretty much just that Golovkin couldn't put out the numbers.
Right.
His pace was just he didn't look like he was getting hurt badly by the shots, but he was getting scared off more than he used to. He was getting countered earlier. So like it was one of those ones where turning he was the volume numbers and speed guy in both of their first two fights, and just turning down the physical dials meant that it just ended up being like really honestly just quite one-sided.
Yeah, what volume he was able to put out was much less effective than it used to be. Like Golovkin is still a puncher, and he was in those other fights. Like what you're saying essentially is that it was the dynamic was that of Alvarez, throwing lower output, more emphatic punches, and Golovkin trying to drown him in numbers. But you could still feel that Golovkin was an impactful puncher with those numbers.
Yes,
that,
it's a triple G jab.
His jab is a problem.
Which is
it's a
one
weapon.
Of the most brutal jabs in combat sports.
Exactly, and he put it out there a ton, but you could see it was genuinely very difficult for Canelo to deal with it. And here, when he did try to put his jab out, Canelo just ignored it. Like it just wasn't a problem. It wasn't fast and surprising. It wasn't setting things up. When he did try to set up combinations, he got countered more often than he actually succeeded in landing anything. And meanwhile, Canelo, who also has a fantastic jab, was just pretty quickly into the fight was just consistently out-jabbing Triple G. Often in exchanges where Triple G would land, and again, like Canelo just ignored it and exchanged jabs, and his looked the harder, cleaner shot. The big thing that really stood out to me was how, I mean, this is a classic sign of an aging fighter, how gun-shy Golovkin looked. That
it's the thing, he didn't get hurt super badly that I can remember, but just that he was not willing to get into exchanges with Alvarez.
He looked uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of and you could see it. It just made it easy for Canelo to roll over him because, Golovkin used to be capable of kind of doing what a version of what Bivol did to Canelo. Like, he used to be much more of a boxer puncher. Didn't just pressure everyone all the time. He was, like a fighter out of like the vast like Soviet school, the old iron block school of boxing. And there's a kind of a recognizable style there. Very bouncy footwork, a lot of movement, good jabs, but then really sitting down on technically sound punches. And he kind of had that full-fledged Soviet boxer style. And but it's been a long time since he's done any of that, and has largely been either pressuring or toe-to-toe in the pocket with people. And here, I don't know if some part of me thought maybe they thought they were going to replicate Bivol's approach, and that he was just coming in more willing to be off the back foot and move around and use his jab and et cetera, et cetera. If so, I think that seems like a pretty risky idea at this stage in the guy's career to make such a dramatic adjustment. But whether it was the plan or not, he was kind of forced into it, and you could see that every time he had to make a defensive move, he would overcommit or half commit. He was second-guessing a lot. There were several occasions here where he would get hit on the shoulder or block a punch with his glove or take a shot to the body and lost his balance and stumbled over his own feet because he was leaning too much to try to get away, or he just looked really awkward on defense in the way that a fighter does when they're gun-shy, when they're not sure that any of the decisions they're making, offensive or defense, are the right ones. And maybe they're just not keeping up with the speed and intensity of the exchanges the way they used to. It just a lot of second guessing is what I saw from Triple G here.
Yeah. And to his credit, he found something late in the fight, and you suddenly, was honestly much too late to make a difference.
Yeah.
You suddenly saw, this was the guy.
Yeah, it was kind of cool.
Started welcoming exchanges, understanding that he wasn't going to, outslick Canelo Alvarez. But if he just stayed in there and kept the combinations going, he could overwhelm Canelo, and he did at certain points.
Mm-hmm.
He had Canelo simply backing up and shelling like Bivol did.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, too late. Still couldn't dent Alvarez's durability in any major way. So he couldn't when he was either in his prime or close to it. He wasn't doing it now, but he was at least able to show why they'd had such great fights together towards the end of the fight.
It was just a faint echo from a distance. And it was still the kind of thing where it just felt like age more than anything, that Canelo put in these uncomfortable positions, sort of being outfoxed at points by this, extremely crafty older fighter. But when it got uncomfortable enough that he just had to decide to put 4 punches out, when he would extend the exchanges, then either Triple G had to just backpedal awkwardly and get back to range because he recognized he couldn't effectively read what was coming back at him in range, or he would just lose the exchange.
Or you would just have to clinch and hold.
Or that. So yeah, that's really all there was to it. A slightly, more than slightly, frankly, a disappointing end to a really thrilling series, which has unfortunately been marred by like any major fight in boxing now, by so much controversy and just intractable arguing about the decisions. And, personally, things would have just been better if Triple G had just won a close decision the first time. Canelo more than earned the decision in the second fight, and then you have this. It still would have been disappointing, but it would have been, I don't know.
Because this one, it felt like Canelo was unfairly up in the trilogy, and it's just him putting the boot in on an aging Triple G.
Yeah, and because really, I'm fine with the draw in the first fight, although admittedly, it has been quite a long time since I've watched it with scoring in mind. At the time,
same here.
I was fine with the draw. But yeah, it does add this additional sour note to this rubber match being you've already won 2, dude. Give the guy a break.
Well, or at least you're already ahead.
Yeah, why did you're ahead on the scores. Why are you doing this to him? He doesn't have a chance. All right, well, that was the conclusion.
I think more than people should just remember the first 2 fights. For being just absolutely sensational fights.
Exactly. Yeah, that's always the disappointment with scorecard arguments in boxing, is that, and this happens in MMA too, but it really defines my relationship to boxing. That it just mars. Same, the Andre Ward Kovalev, all these controversies just mar what are incredible fights. That is how I would much prefer to remember this rivalry, as just 2 guys who, when they were both close enough to their prime, delivered sensational, competitive, high-level contests. And this was not one of those.
Remember the first 2.
Yep.
You can pretty much forget this one.
Remember the first 2 and just turn it off when the scores are announced. Just appreciate the action for what it is, because it's great.
Leave this one in the bin with Leonard Duran 3 and a few other sort of unnecessary trilogies.
Exactly. All right, well, that'll do it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. Thank you all very much for listening in. Of course, we've got a weekend off from the UFC schedule. Next week, we will therefore be previewing the first UFC fight night of October, which is main evented by Mackenzie Dern and Yan Xiaonan. It's got some okay fights on it. It's a little perplexing and weird, but I think the plan as of now is to memorialize some news which we have yet to mention. Jose Aldo, as far as I can tell, asked out of his UFC contract or fought it out and announced his retirement.
I believe he's got one fight remaining.
Okay, but they let him out of the contract, right? Like I think he retired. He officially retired. Really, you couldn't think of a better time to do it. Like, God knows I more than half thought it was the right time to do it after McGregor knocked him out, and then after Holloway beat him the first time, and certainly after the second time, and he still had this truly Roberto Duran-esque stage of incredible legacy-cementing performances late in his career. Now it feels like a perfect time to ride off into the sunset, and so given that we had actual pertinent recent fights to talk about this week, and we have fewer of those next week, we are planning to do a little Jose Aldo retrospective, slotted in some position of prominence among all of the Dern-Yan talk. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. God knows I am. It's an incredible career that deserves to be celebrated, and we're going to have a good time looking back at some of his greatest moments. That'll be next week. Until then, you should find us on Twitter at EvilGregJackson. That's Phil at BoxingBush. That's me. Check out the Patreon, patreon.com/heavyhands. And until next week, if you guys came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.